for Migration hosts the Global Migration Film Festival from November 28th, leading up to International Migrants Day on December 18th. In past years, IOM has organized screenings in over 100 countries, reaching audiences of up to 60,000 people annually. This year marks the 5th edition of the festival, and while we couldn't all be together in person, we are excited to virtually bring the festival to your homes. The festival reaches a broad global audience and highlights the realities that are driving migration around the world today. A broad range of factors will affect the characteristics and scale of migration in the future. The decisions we make in the face of today's unparalleled challenge to global mobility and people on the move will affect the global, social, and economic landscape for years to come. IOM advocates for a more favorable, inclusive, and balanced attitude towards migrants. In this spirit, the Global Migration Film Festival can be used as an educational tool to influence perceptions and bring attention to social issues such as migration. Today's film shows the challenges of forced migration, which can help viewers like you cultivate deeper empathy for migrants and a better understanding of their needs, perspectives, and capacities. This year's theme for International Migrants Day is centered on how the Global Compact for Migration presents an opportunity to reimagine human mobility for the benefit of all. In the context of COVID-19, the need for effective migration governance is as pressing as ever, and the Global Compact, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2018, is an effective tool for member states to discuss how best to address challenges to human mobility without compromising the human rights of people and states' sovereignty. We can all agree it's been an especially challenging year for humanity. COVID-19 has impacted the lives of billions of people, disrupted the global economy, and exposed pre-existing inequalities. The most vulnerable populations, those furthest behind, have been the hardest hit. This is the case for many people on the move, whether within their own countries or across international borders. The pandemic has taken a toll on the psychological and social well-being of many, and migrants often have limited access to basic services, including mental health and psychosocial support. This is why the film 8,000 Paperclips is particularly interesting, as it explores the universal needs of humans and the role of art in healing trauma. Joining us today is an esteemed panel of guests to talk more about the film and this topic. Moderating our discussion is Dr. Bobby Wegner, a clinical psychologist, Harvard University lecturer, and USA for IOM board member. We are also pleased to have our panelists, Nitsan Tal, the director of the amazing film you just watched, Raffael Lomas, the inspiring artist featured in the film, Dao Dol Dol, a graduate student and former refugee from South Sudan, and Edward L. Shapiro, managing trustee of the Shapiro Foundation and a generous supporter of USA for IOM. If you'd like to read their full bios, please visit our event page at usaforiom.org, and this link can also be found in the chat box. If you have any questions for the panelists, please make sure to use the Q&A feature in the Zoom platform and not the chat box. Now, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Bobby Wegner to start our discussion.
Thank you so much, Liz. And welcome everyone to our panelists and our viewers all over the world. And before we start today, I just want to pause for a moment and really notice what we're doing here together. At a time of global crisis, massive disconnection, isolation, loneliness, and really when we're sitting alone in front of our computer, we in fact are coming together as a band of strangers to think and feel together, to watch a movie, to connect, to share, and to discuss how to make the world a more connected, loving, and healthier place for us all. One shared humanity, and I just really appreciate you all being here. So 8,000 Paperclips is really a story of healing through connection. What Raffael said early on in the movie really resonated with me. How do we bring what we were previously attached to a new place? How do we bring the old to the new? How do we manage to keep living when our connections with our families are not simple? Paperclips, they connect, but they're fragile. Joining together in our strength And with that, let's join the conversation together, connecting, sharing, and building strength from whatever corner of the world you sit at. So much like the House of Paperclips, we're here as an art of social change. So let's talk together. And Dow, if it's okay to start with you, being from South Sudan and growing up in a refugee camp, I'm just wondering what it was like for you to watch this movie and what your initial impression was.
Wow. Watching the movie, it was incredible. It was well put together. As the journey, it's something that did resonate with me growing up in the refugee camp in Kenya. Seeing those young people they themselves were born in the refugee camp or in internally displaced camps, whether then in Sudan or in Ethiopia or Uganda, and then how they find themselves fleeing all the way and ending up in Israel by no means of their own doing, but their parents, basically it's survival mode, looking for a better life for them to take them out of the conflict zone. And so seeing how, their whole livelihood was established in Israel, and then having that being completely uprooted and returned back to South Sudan, that was hard to see because I myself didn't live in South Sudan. I was born there and grew up in Kenya and the United States. And so it's like me being taken from the United States and completely being put back in South Sudan without any connections or any sort in any shape or form, because that is my home country. And so for me, I resonate with them really, on a deeper level. I understood their pain and their struggle and where they were coming from, because they didn't know South Sudan. To them, it was just their country of origin.
Right.
And they struggled with that really hard to make that, that resonation that they were back in South Sudan. And what do they do? How do they move forward? What is life for them in this new country that they've never been before?
There's so many questions I want to ask you, because I think that was a really strong part of the movie that came through to me too. It's this sort of sense of security that's kind of lost, and connection, and what do you do with that? And Ed, just given your philanthropic work really focused on refugee issues, how did you feel watching this movie, and what resonated with you?
Sorry, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I have to say that I was just totally blown away by this film. And I want to congratulate Nilsson and Raffael for just an amazing, incredible project. I guess specifically what I would say affected me was that while I had heard about the 2012 deportation of the asylum seekers to South Sudan, I don't think I actually really believed it until I saw it, until I watched the film. I've been involved more recently, and when there have been ongoing threats of deportation to the existing community, I was reminded that this happened, that it was very real, that 700 people and a lot of children were deported, and it can happen again. So I think it's an important reminder that we have to be vigilant. It's amazing that the world let this happen back in 2012. But at the same time, I think I was really inspired by Raffael, Leah, Rami, and how they used this situation to mobilize support across Israel and create this amazing school and this project and continue to sustain it and grow it. That's been my experience, that regardless of what the leadership in any country position they may have around immigrants, there's always a core group of people that care deeply, especially with children. We know that's a sympathetic target, and when given the opportunity and with their leadership to create the school, we're able to get the kind of support and sustain it that they have for the last 7 years.
Great. Thanks for sharing. I think, Nilsson, you did a really nice job taking this issue that seems so big and far away and humanizing it and putting the story to it that I think we all could connect to on a deep level, regardless of where we sit. But can you really tell us what motivated you to make this movie and kind of what the heart for you is behind this?
So I first got involved with this project as a videographer. Raffael was looking for somebody to document his project, and he contacted me, and I went to Africa just as a videographer to be of service. And later, when Raffael was invited to exhibit the sculpture, the 8,000 paperclip sculpture in San Diego at the New Americans Museum, we decided that we should edit a short film that will tell the story of where the sculpture came from, because the sculpture itself, it's kind of hard to understand what's behind it. So we edited a 26-minute film, but it was a very factual film. It didn't deal with any dilemmas or anything like that. But when I was working on that, I felt that I really wanted to deal with the other question, with the moral dilemma, with the question of whether it's justified to spend limited resources on art and other things. And that's when I decided to make the feature film.
Thank you. Yeah, you tackle so many different issues in this, and that are really fused together pretty seamlessly between mobility and trauma and love and connection. They sort of all come together in this really beautiful way. Raphael, if we could move to you, I think you're such a relatable person in this movie and sharing your story. And I think what makes you so connecting is not just you focusing on helping other people, but you really sharing a piece of yourself with all of us. And part of that was sharing your own struggle with depression and sharing your vulnerability that I think adds a depth to this movie. So I was just wondering if you could share with us a little bit about how you think using art in healing trauma or healing in general is important, and also, what you think about its relevance, particularly today.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie. I haven't seen it for a year, really, and the kids and Abdallah come, their vitality comes so beautifully. I miss them so much. Healing is a big word. Healing is a big word, and I also felt that me sharing my own personal story is totally relevant, because I was asking the kids to bring from themselves, but in my personal history, I was lucky enough, while I was in clinical depression, to encounter creativity that was able, through art, to leash my own vitality. I'm not sure healing is the exact word I would relate to, but vitality I was able to be alive again. And thinking if it's relevant for me as an individual, how curious I was to see if it's really a tool that could be used on a larger, for society. I'm also a son of a Holocaust survivor, so being a son of a refugee is a matter which I'm very much familiar with. So it was important for me, and it still is. It's an ongoing project to see what art and creativity could bring to those traumatic situations. Depression could come from inside, and depression could come from outside circumstances. They usually trigger each other. And I have no doubt, even through the experience I have, that it's a beautiful and a very powerful, maybe the most powerful tool we have as human beings to try to navigate through those devastating situations.
Yeah, I really appreciate you making that distinction, kind of talking about healing. And I like the word you choose, sort of vitality, because I think it really shows that, it's not so polarized or dichotomous. It's like, I think you and Nitsan did a really good job kind of showing a slice of human life and something that we can all connect with. It's not well and unwell or healthy, unhealthy. It's like we all fluctuate through different circumstances throughout life and different feelings and different emotions. And I think by you really sharing that part of yourself, it not only allowed the children to share their story and to normalize their story, it allowed the audience to also too connect and resonate on a deeper level. So I just, it's not an easy thing to do. It's very brave to kind of go first and share, but it just adds a really, really connecting, beautiful element. So thank you. And Nitsan, in kind of producing and making this movie, what was most surprising to you?
Oh, good question. I think what really surprised me is to to realize again the power of connections. And that's also why I decided to title the film 8,000 Paperclips, because there's a lot of subjects that we talk about, but the connection, the strength of connection, and nowadays, it's so easy to forget about it. I mean, we used to have to go to like an art class or a book club to discuss a art. And now you can just watch a YouTube video and learn everything you want to know about drawing or sketching. And we miss on the connection. The connection with other people is just so important. And I saw the power that it had for the refugee children, how happy they were to connect with Raffael, with me, with the Jewish community. And that's something that I carried with me from there, and that's something that I'm trying to implement back in my life now. And unfortunately with COVID, that's the main thing that we miss right now. But hopefully in a few months, maybe with the vaccine, we can go back to normal.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And it's like there's often, at least in psychological literature, to kind of the importance of connection. But oftentimes it's sort of like, what does that mean? Or how do you feel it? Or you can take it for granted because we have it in a lot of different ways. But COVID has really stripped us of that. And I know, at least for me personally, I can feel it on a visceral level. And I think all of us can probably understand that even more so than ever. And Raffael, coming back to you too, do you have any updates on the Come True organization?
Some, yeah, but it's important for me to mention that I'm not part of the Come True organization. When I heard about this project, I really felt it's a unique situation for me to try to interact and to bring this project. I am in contact. I know that the COVID also impact the schools in Uganda were closed, and again children were not on safe ground. Nitzan is much more, if I may say, is much more connected on a personal level to the organization. But the project is growing and continues, and I think it's also, for me, one of the beautiful things in this project, that all the project really started because of two kids being good friends, right? And the importance of friendship, and how far a friendship between two kids could save lives of hundreds of other kids. But Nitzan could tell much more specific information.
Great. Well, what are you working on, Raffael? What's in the cards for you these days?
I'm a sculptor, so I have my individual doing, but I also one of the project I put a lot of my creativity into social doing project, and one of them is project I'm doing with some metal I have received from the Twin Towers. I was living at that time in New York, and I was part of the tragedy. And after 11 years of investigation, I mean, after the tragedy, they took all the metal and put them in huge hangars in JFK to do the investigation. And after the investigation was over, after 11 years, they said, so what should we do with the metal? So 70% of the metal they decided to melt and to cast the biggest warship ever, which they did. You didn't hear about it, which is weird, which is also part of the story. But unfortunately, there was 30% left. And even in America, you can't cast two biggest warships. So it was a problem. And they decided this 30% to donate to art projects, which really means that art starts where logic ends. So I was lucky enough to receive part of this medal, and together with the San Francisco University, we are in a project of planning a memorial park, growing park, with the medal and the families of 9/11.
Wow. So will that be in New York or California?
It will be in California.
California, great.
Yeah.
So you're really using art as sort of like a vehicle of social change. It seems like you're just focused on different.
I'm trying. I have many failures. I mean, it's a good question. What are the criteria for success in this kind? Because I didn't change the life of those refugees or Abdallahs, or I can't. Nobody could go back and change reality. But I do think that. As Victoria even said in the movie beautifully, that the biggest lesson that she took from it, that working together is a major tool. I really believe creativity and art as part of it is an amazing tool of doing, and doing is changing, and doing could shift things, not change, but a bit differently.
Yeah, or getting back to what you said earlier about kind of connecting with a vitality in a new way. I would debate you to say that you haven't changed them. You can't change their history, but you probably help them change by connecting with their own sense of vitality and agency, and that I feel like changes people forever in a different, deeper way.
Let's hope. I don't know.
So during the film, we see the significant impact on education. And can you tell us a little bit about your journey going from a refugee camp to a Gates Millennial Scholar?
Yeah, for sure. And before I answer that question, I just want to say, Raphael, you did make an impact on them. Yeah. I think what you brought is a sense of familiarity, a sense of reality that they had lost before. And so to be able to connect to Israel in some shape or form and speak Hebrew, they felt home, they felt at peace. Mm-hmm. And that created a process of healing for them. And that in itself, I saw where they were in the unknown, but now they were in the known. So there was a sense of peace toward the end for them, where they felt home because they could speak Hebrew. They could, indulge in the Hebrew culture and be able to be with the Jewish community in northern Uganda. And so for them, that was peace of mind, but also peace in reality, to be with a people, what they known as home for them. So you did make an impact in that sense. And and their interaction with you it's of friendship and of mentorship. And just to go, no, for sure. And my education started in the refugee camp in Kenya. And so it was the first time I went to school. Before that, I had not gone to school. And so I started primary education in Kenya through learning Swahili and English as a secondary language. And so by the time I got to 4th grade, my family was resettled to the United States in 2005. And so completely leaving everything behind that I'd known in the refugee camp. My family had been in the refugee camp for 7 years, from 1999 until 2005. And so coming to the United States, it was a new environment, a new culture that I had to, again, assimilate myself into with my family. My English was okay until I came to the States. And so having to assimilate and learn the English language was hard, especially how Americans speak. They speak very fast the first time you interact with them. And so, but I was able to learn English really fast because I was a teenager, me and my siblings. All we just did was turn on the TV because we were so curious. We never had a TV before. And so we were watching PBS and all the great shows that were on there, Sesame Street, Clifford the Big Red Dog. And so all those shows we were watching by summertime, for 3 full months, we learned how to speak English and we assimilate ourselves into the English language. And so by the time I went back to school, school got so easier for me because I was able to make friends because I could speak the language. Play sports was another way to make friendship and build friendship. And so by the time I got to high school, I understood the importance of education because my parents never had any sense of education before. My mom always stressed the importance of education. She said, son, it's better to work with your brain than your hands. Sooner than later, your hands will give out, but your mind will never give out on you. And so the importance of education there for me, I was always involved in extracurricular activities in organizations and made sure to have my grades. And so by the time it came to graduating high school, I knew I wanted to go to college, but paying for college was a different story. So I talked to my guidance counselor and she was like, okay, you have the grades. Here are the scholarships you can apply for. And so the Gates Millennium Scholar was one of them, where I applied. I was able to tell my story, how I got here. And I was thankful, I was blessed to be able to be offered the opportunity to be a Gates Scholar. It was a rigorous process. I always said that I was lucky because it's only about 1,000 students nationwide get it. And I was lucky to be one of those people. And so I was able to go to American University for undergrad and I studied international relations. And so one of the students in the video mentioned she wanted to study international relations. And so that's what I studied. My focus was peace and conflict resolution and sustainable development and US foreign policy. And so now I'm doing my master's at George Washington University in international education. And so I've been very blessed and been very fortunate in my journey to where I am today. Not too many refugees have been blessed or have been fortunate as I am. And so that I'm thankful, I'm grateful.
I'm sure it was more than just luck, you know, just listening to your story and hearing what you're saying. I actually don't even know what to say because it seems like you accomplished so much and you're still so young and working. I feel like you're about to save the world. And I want to ask you like 50 other questions offline later, but we're time limited now. And Ed, so you are an incredibly committed philanthropist, and as a board member of USA for IOM, I want to say thank you for just being such a generous supporter of us. It's hard to get money from people, and you are one of those people who give us money and can do a lot of the work that's so important across the globe. But just from your perspective, how do you think Americans can further support migrants and refugees? And thinking about the people watching this movie now, I think a lot of these issues feel so gigantic and people care and they're empathic, but they don't know where to go from here. And do you have any suggestions for our viewers and just for people at large?
Yeah, I think, I often describe philanthropy as one giant psychology project. There are very few right and wrongs and ways to give, but I believe that the better you can make a donor feel about the difference that they can make, the more willing and maybe even anxious they are going to be to give. And the challenge with refugees and immigrants and really international giving in general is that by definition, they are removed, they are distant.
Yeah.
And realistically, most people aren't going to be able to get on a plane and fly halfway across the world to Uganda or Bangladesh or Jordan to see them firsthand. But there are a couple of ways that we've been working on to try to make this a reality and make this more effective. The first is what we call community sponsorship. Creating a system whereby local communities can get involved directly, can donate, can volunteer to help refugees resettle in their own countries, in their own communities. And that's something we've been doing a lot of ways, kind of the catalyst for me getting involved locally, sponsoring in our community Syrian refugee families 4 years ago, and seeing and experiencing through their eyes the struggles, and making you that much more empathetic to the plight of the 28 million refugees around the world. And the other is film. And hopefully, as you've all experienced just now, film can be a very powerful tool to bring the stories of refugees, especially children, and make that a priority. My wife reminds me often that I am not necessarily typical, but I can tell you that the first thing I did when I watched the 8,000 Paperclips trailer a few weeks ago was dive in, get on the Come True website, learn everything I could about it, make a donation for a scholarship. And then last night, watching the full film for the first time, before I went to sleep, I reached out, I emailed Leah to ask for more information, just so inspired by this and all the work that's been done over the last 7 years. And I hope that film, this beautiful work, can be shared and can introduce so many more people to this cause and other causes of refugees and immigrants. I know IOM has made this commitment for many years, as you said, for the film festival. And so this gives an opportunity to transmit to a much larger audience the work that's being done by so many other inspiring leaders.
Yeah, I'm kind of bubbling over with ideas now, and now I have all your email addresses. So I feel like I teach child advocacy at Harvard Grad School of Education, and we have all these really motivated students from all over the world who are deeply caring, and I'm just thinking of other ways we could put our heads together and do something around creating curriculum or creating something film to educate and helping kids develop empathy at a younger age. So yeah, we're not in a brainstorming session, but my mind's going there right now. So we're getting some questions from the audience, but just before we jump to that, I want to give you all the opportunity on the panel to either ask each other questions, or if there's something I have not asked that you would want to share. Does anyone want to say anything or ask each other anything?
I would maybe just ask Nitsan, what has been the experience to date? When was the film actually completed? And has there been an attempt in the United States or in other countries to exhibit it? Obviously, COVID makes that difficult in a traditional theatrical sense, but streaming and at home, it's harder to promote, obviously get people interested, but I'm curious what you've done or plan on doing.
So first of all, thank you for all the warm words about the film. I highly appreciate it. So we completed the film in January of 2020, not a very fortunate time. And we submitted to a number of festivals. It did get into a few of them were postponed, a few of them were canceled, some of them went virtual. I think we had maybe one live screening in Europe 2 months ago. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to do too much. It was screened in a few festivals, but it's hard for me to even get a feedback, because when the festival is online, I really don't get much of a feedback. I mean, I'm dying to travel to a festival and actually be there when the film is screened on a real screen, and it hasn't happened yet. So we'll see. I'm basically right now, I'm kind of like taking it slow and waiting for the COVID situation to improve, and then we'll probably go back and see what we can salvage.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you all. Any other questions or thoughts from the panel before we take some questions? So we have one gigantic question that is hard to answer, but how do we prevent governments in the future from implementing unjust actions like deporting vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers? So does anyone have any ideas about how we can help, kind of prevent governments from, deporting vulnerable people? That's a big one.
I mean, I guess having spent the last 3 years and 11 months in my own country trying to offset a government that seemed intent on doing just that, I can tell you it's quite difficult depending on the country and the laws. In general, the president or prime minister has enormous authority around immigration. But I think what we've seen, and we saw it in Israel, I guess in 2017, when there was a threat, a very real threat to deport, it's not technically deport, but resettle 10,000 of the asylum seekers to Uganda and Rwanda. There was just a massive effort, grassroots effort, protests, people who hadn't gotten involved, as I understand it, historically. Nitsan Raphael probably can tell you more, but my sense was, and I saw the videos and the reports of how much the rallies that went on, it said this is not just, it's not going to happen. And there was enormous political pressure. And in fact, the government backed down and didn't go forward with that. The pressure was put not only on Israel, but on the receiving countries. And I think there was explicit criticism of those countries that they didn't fulfill their promises to take these people because they in turn got so much pressure from the international community. So I think it can work. It's not easy and it's not always going to work, but the people have a voice, particularly in democracies.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point. And it's like thinking about a topic like that's so big can feel so daunting and then paralyzing to people. But at the end of the day, we all have tools kind of within our reach, and really thinking about kind of what tools you have and what position of power you have, whether it's using your voice in your local community or banding together a group of like-minded people or writing a blog post, but starting small can actually make a big impact. And it can generate momentum that much like Raphael did in the movie, it's like you kind of go first and you put your voice out there, and then before you know it, there's a whole bunch of people who can jump on board with you too. So, I think we have to get ready to wrap up soon, but any last comments or thoughts from the panelists before we end? Not so much. So I just want to thank you all. Oh, Nitsan, did you want to say something?
I want to add to what Ed just said. I think non-profit organizations have an amazing power. And if a person can do nothing else, they can choose to support an organization that advocates for refugees, an organization that advocates for refugee laws. I think that's a simple way that anybody can contribute.
Thank you. That's really important and a very practical tip that people can actually do today. So finding an organization that's meaningful for you. And for us at USA for IOM, we have a donate button right on the front of our website, and put those funds to good use. But anything else that people want to think about or say before we end?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, organizations, like Nissan said, are great ways. I think getting in touch with refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, I think that personal connections just creates that human connection that is there, that is often not seen when it comes to policy and politics. It triumphs all those things because at the end of the day, people are just able to see each other as human beings, and the friendship that they build and the connections that they have. And so being able to have friends that are refugees, migrants, or asylum seekers, it triumphs everything because we're able to have that personal to personal connection with them. And so when it comes to such policy, you're more likely to know where you stand on that issue and what you can do, and and not feel a sense of hopeless that it's impossible. There's nothing that you can do. There's always something.
I think that's great. you know, and thinking about it from, I read a lot about parenting and psychology, and really thinking about the stories that we're sharing with our children too, and the younger generations. So it's like, what are we sharing? How are we talking more directly? How are we inviting like lots of different stories into our homes, and you know, sharing different stories with our children changes the narrative. Speaking of
My tooth came out.
it did. Sorry, my 7-year-old. Speaking of parenting, her tooth just came out. Okay, hold on, I'm on this. So we better wrap up. That was perfect timing, or not.
Wonderful.
But thank you all for being here and for all your amazing work. And Liz, I'll pass the floor back to you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on the tooth. Awesome. Thank you again for moderating, Bobby, and to our panelists. You know, we really appreciate your insights today, and we trust that our audience is going to leave inspired to take action. Again, before the session started, we shared a survey. So if you can please take a few minutes to complete that second section of the survey. You should have already completed the first section before the film. And lastly, I'd like to give a special thanks to the team behind the scenes that made this event possible. So my colleagues Lirato Gale, Yara Albayari, Jaime Martinez, Lawrence Book McKnight, and Allison Block for your help to organize this event, and to the rest of our IOM staff and volunteers for your support. That concludes our program. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you at our next event on Thursday, December 17th at 5 p.m. We'll be discussing the 360 film, Walking for Freedom, which follows the journey of refugees and migrants. Thanks again, and see you soon.